Okay, here we go. With the grace of God, let's uncover another deep, dark secret that has been hidden for thousands and thousands of years. After Jesus died, a little while later, the Romans were coming to attack Jerusalem, and they destroyed the temple. Now, the temple had a lot of gold, a lot of artifacts, a lot of jewels. I mean, literally, it would be billions and billions and billions of dollars in today's market of gold and precious gems were in the temple. Now, when the Jews saw that the Romans were coming, in AD 66, some of the Jewish leaders hid the treasures. They hid about half of the treasure underneath the temple. Now, you might be thinking, how come they didn't hide it all? You see, if they hid it all, the Romans would know that the Jews hid it all, and they would start killing and torturing them until they told them where it was located. So they actually did something very smart. They hid half of it underneath the temple, allowing the Romans to find the other half and being satisfied that this is all there is. Now look what happens next. So this is what we have. Half of the treasures are buried underneath the temple, and the other half is carried back to Rome as spoils of war. Now, many, many years later, the Knights Templars heard about the treasure in Jerusalem, and they left Europe, this very secret organization that's probably still in existence today. They left Europe under the pretense of going to Jerusalem, setting them free from the Muslims, fighting the different Muslim empires. One of the real reasons why the Knights Templars invaded Jerusalem was to find the treasure. Guess what? They found it. So the Knights Templars find all of the treasures, and this time they carry it back to France. Now, what about the treasures that were taken back to Rome in AD 66? What happened is Rome was invaded by the Goths, and the Goths found the treasures, and the Goths took the treasures back to southern France near the Pyrenees Mountains. So we have the Knights Templars bringing the treasures back to France, and we have the Goths who invaded Rome. They're bringing the treasures back to some mountain regions in France. Let's do a short recap because that got confusing. First, the Goths invaded Rome, carried the treasures back to the mountains in France. Then, you see, there were wealthy families in France who knew that the other half of the treasure was in Jerusalem. So many years later, in the year 1099, these families hired and became the Knights Templars. And in around 1099, they invade Jerusalem, and they excavate Jerusalem for 9 years looking for the treasures. 9 years of digging. After 9 years of digging around the year 1099, the treasures were found and taken to the Rennes-le-Château in France. So we have half the treasures in this chateau in France. The other half is located in the mountain regions in France. Now we get to the Nazis. In September 1943, Hitler had a top commando. This was a very special man, a German commando. His name was Otto Skorzeny. Now, Otto Skorzeny was the commando who actually Hitler sent in to rescue Mussolini from being assassinated, from being murdered. That's who this commando is. In 1944, the German Nazi leadership sends Otto and a battalion of troopers into France. You see, there was a German named Rahn, R-A-H-N, who had been researching the stolen treasures of the Jews, and he knew that it was all in southern France. So Hitler and Goering send Otto and his elite commandos into southern France to look for the treasures. Guess what? In March 16th, 1944, Otto sends a telegram to Himmler. There was a one word and one word only: Eureka. So what happened with all of this massive amount of treasures and wealth? Listen to this, because this has been kept secret for 70 years. The Germans started bringing the gold and precious gems and jewelry back to Germany. This was called Operation Eagle Flight. The Germans now use this gold to form 750 corporations all over the world. And some of these corporations are here right now today. You see, the Nazis might have lost the war militarily speaking. They did not lose. The Nazis won the war. The Nazis won World War II. Now, we have other videos on this. Let's continue, though. How did the Nazis win the war? Because they switched from trying to take over the world militarily, which they failed, to taking over the world financially, which they succeeded, and they won World War II, and they are still here today in the year 2018. They are still here today. Some of the 750 corporations that the Nazis started and funded with this Jewish gold would be Mercedes, Siemens, J.P. Morgan family, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, ITT, Deutsche Bank, and Chase Bank. I use Chase Bank. I'm using a Nazi corporation. I hope you're finding this interesting, because not only did the Nazis not lose the war, they won the war. They dominated the war. They own most of the big banks. They own most of the corporations in effect now. How did they do it? With the Jewish gold from the temple. As you can see, there is so much more going on than we had ever thought or imagined. And we're also learning that almost all history is a lie. Almost all of it is a lie. The Nazis are here, and in some ways, they rule the planet, and they run the planet now. That's why when people ask me, Garrett, who do you think is actually ruling the world? Is it the Illuminati? Is it the Masons? Is it the Vatican? I mean, all of those are okay answers. But the better answer is no, it's the Nazis in Antarctica and up on the moon and living in underground bases who I believe are above everybody. And I believe they're working hand in hand with the so-called gray aliens / demons. That's who I'm being led to believe is actually ruling the world. How? They found the treasures. They found the gold. They found the jewels that were hidden all over France. They found it all. They took it all in World War II, shipped it back to Germany, and formed 750 corporations, or funded corporations, or finance corporations like JP Morgan, Chase, Mercedes, and on and on. Isn't this incredible? Spread the word. And also praise God for teaching us this. Praise God that the Nazis are not getting away with this, and that these little videos will help shine the light of Jesus Christ on them. They're not going to get away with everything, only because of God's grace.